It's exactly on 6 o'clock. Right now we are in admit. There's people entering now. Hello, welcome. Hi, Hanlie.
Hi there. I'm so happy to see you.
Happy to see you too. How are you? How's South Africa?
South Africa is nice and warm today, so it's a lovely day.
Lovely day today.
Will you allow me to share my screen?
Yes, let me put you on a co-host. Good evening, everybody in the UAE and in the Middle East. And good afternoon to everybody down south in the world. Welcome to a lovely session on emotional intelligence for leaders. So whether you're a leader in the education fraternity, whether you're a leader in your home as a parent, whether you're a leader in the corporate environment, today is a day where you're going to get an opportunity to listen, to explore, as well as to do some active interaction through activity and polls to test your emotional intelligence levels. With us on our webinar in this Middle East Teaching and Learning Conference is Hanlie and Addandale from South Africa. Hanlie is an industrial psychologist and behavioral specialist with the Neuro-Leadership Institute, and I'm really proud to have her collaborate with us in this summit. Welcome, Hanlie. How are you doing?
Hi, Atiyya. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for having me. I'm excited to be with you all.
Wonderful. And so are we too. We're waiting for more people to get on call, and I'm sure they'll be coming in. But as we are waiting for them, let me just hear from the participants who are here thus far. Where are you logging in from? I see. Welcome, Andy and Saliha. And Lisa, of course, Lisa is the editor, chief editor of Teach Middle East magazine, as well as one of the main organizers of this summit. Welcome, Lisa. Would you like to unmute and say something?
Just wanted to say hi, and hopefully more people join in. If not, definitely they'll benefit from the recording of this session. So we look forward to a great session. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Yes, ladies, and gentlemen, we are recording so that this webinar will be available for viewing later on throughout the summit. And I think later on, we also have it in other spaces. I'm not sure where, but Lisa will fill us in on the Hoover app as to where a person would be able to access this recording from at a later time. So, Hanlie, what makes you excited about this topic in particular? As a behavioral specialist, why EQ is such an important topic of the day?
It is hugely important. So for me, this has been a bit of a discovery through this whole COVID experience around how important it really is to manage our emotions, really thinking about the small things we need to do, and to think about that has such a huge impact on our decisions and the way we just have relationships with other people and how we solve problems. So I'm passionate about every single angle, so really excited to be on the call with everyone and sharing some of that today.
Lovely, lovely. Can you share screen from your side? So this is your screen on our side, right? So if you are ready to begin with the model, now different speakers or different people within the psychology field have different models. And one of the common ones is which is based on the 3-part model. And she's going to begin the slide right away, where we need to realize that this model is something that's applicable to any type of environment, as I said in the beginning of the call. So whether you're in parenting, coaching, corporate environment, NGO, education, anything of the sort, using our emotional intelligence by being aware of these types of models really empowers us in the manner in which we manage ourselves and the manner in which we navigate our way through the relationships we interact with on a day-to-day basis. As a leader, this is particularly important because not only are we responsible for the productivity and for the project goals in whichever setting, I mean, it can even be in a sales team. Not only are we responsible for those operational goals and productivity goals that's set for us by the powers that be, depending where you are in the management system and the leadership system, but we are also then responsible for the well-being of the people around us. And how can we do that if we're not well ourselves? So here we go, Hanlie, take it away.
Absolutely, thank you so much. So the slide I've got on the screen right now, and can I just confirm that you can see the slide clearly?
We can see that.
So the slide I've got on here is crucial for me. So when we talk about emotional intelligence and when we talk about self-management as a leadership group, what's crucial is that we need to share certain behaviors and habits to help the people around us with their own emotional intelligence. So I'm sharing this because in the back of your minds, I would love you to think about what are the things that you can take back to your own teams, and as a leader, show yourself, but also what are some of the things that you, and simple things, simple habits that you can incorporate on a daily basis. So you can see we speak about both behavior change and we speak about that common language that is important in terms of how we want the culture of our teams to be. And so the model that we use, and based on the very simple Daniel Goleman model that we all know of emotional intelligence, which is based on self-awareness, self-management, and we need to do the two to be able to manage any relationships. So it is the traditional model that we use, but really from a neuroscience perspective, we need to talk about emotional fluency. And emotional fluency is our ability to think about ourselves. But before we think about how am I dealing with my emotions, we need to understand how the brain works and what our primary organizing principle is from a brain perspective. So when we talk about self-awareness, we're talking about how do I manage my emotions in the moment? How do I notice? How do I label my emotions in the moment before I then even go into the space of self-management? And when I talk about self-management in this area, I talk about the problems I'm solving, the types of decisions I'm making, the type of team member I am being. So those are crucial, and that I would love us to spend much more time on today. And then we probably need to end with good skills around social awareness and relationship management. And that is the part that we kind of combine, because again, from a neuroscience perspective, we know how the brain works. And so for us to manage relationships is also again from a brain perspective. So people need to be socially aware, knowing if my brain works in this way, then my team members also, and what are the practical things I can do to create the right environment so that we can have that common and shared language.
Hanlie, you know what I find really thought-provoking is that generally when we speak about emotions, we tend to think of emotions being heart-based. You know, it's a heart-seated, heart-based kind of things. We feel it in our chest. And yet you're speaking from a neurological leadership point of view, and you're mentioning the brain a couple of times. Do you want to share with us, how do you gel these two together? Where's the heart-mind-body connection coming from, and why is what would a organization without EQ look like? Maybe by looking at it from that way, we'd realize the value of the EQ in the organizational mindset.
So I've actually just read a very interesting article. So you're asking the question, what would an organization without EQ look like? And literally I've just read, as I was waiting for the school, I read an article about Zoom, where the system crashed when all the schools started this week. The system actually crashed, and they initially the immediate response was, we apologize for the inconvenience caused. And that was a very simple email. I can actually read it on your phone. It was, I apologize, very systems orientated email that they responded with. And then that same evening, the CEO actually responded with a proper response around saying, I apologize for the inconvenience. You were excited about joining a new school year and you couldn't. I apologize for decisions that couldn't be made today on the back of the system not working. I promise you that I am vested and that this will not happen again. We are doing this and we're doing that. And that for me is a brilliant example of relatedness of emotions into decision making, of really, because that settles me from a relationship point of view. That answer is kind of settling me so that I know Zoom is doing what they can and not wanting to move on to the next best product. And so for me, that was probably a good example of an initial response and then a good response that built trust. Because ultimately with emotional intelligence, what we know is from a one-on-one perspective, emotional intelligence in relationships builds trust and connectedness between people. And in teams, emotional intelligence brings psychological safety in teams and between people, which means we are more willing to grow and to learn together. And that's what we all want in our teams. Your question was, what does an organization without emotional intelligence look like? And for me, that would be a systemic, process-driven, tick-boxing company where people are treated like machines and not as human beings that can contribute, and that contributes to more than just work.
Wow, that is very, very profound. I like what you said about psychological safety. Not many people use that term, psychological safety. And I, for one, would certainly not feel happy in an environment where it's only about, another term I heard you use, tick boxing. Sounds like kickboxing, but I know the boxes, kickboxing. I really like that. I'm sure the people on the call must have been hearing it for the first time as well. So that's a new term for you guys from Hanlie herself, kickboxing, right? So so you mentioned that this is the Goldman model, and this is the basis of all. Does the Neuro-Leadership Institute model differ from this?
So we use the brain's perspective on emotional intelligence. And when I say the brain's perspective, for me, and I'm talking from me personally as a behavior specialist, as working with people, before we can manage emotions, we need to understand the brain's perspective first. And what we know is that the brain's primary organizing principle is to detect threats and to maximize reward. We are not wired to thrive. We are wired to keep on living. And so the brain does what it can do to keep you safe. And in its attempt to keep you safe, it literally detects for potential threats in your environment every single second. And so that is at the basis of managing emotions. When any piece of information enters your system, enters your brain, it is through your 5 senses into your limbic system. And a big part of your limbic system, so I'm just going to keep it brief. Your limbic system's function, and specifically the amygdala, needs to release the hormones to either get your system ready to fight or to protect yourself, maybe fight, flight, freeze, or flock. That's a new one we've added because we've realized that people want safety in numbers. So if I feel kind of threatened, I go to my next person and saying, did you also see that? Did you also feel that? Are you also scared about this? So that's the flocking that we see. When we are in that space, we cannot use our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that we need for complex thinking, that we need to have a better perception, working memory, where we can actually solve problems. I'm holding it here because the prefrontal cortex sits right here behind our foreheads. So when we are in a reward state, we're able to be creative, we're able to be innovative, we can collaborate with other people. So with the Neuro-Leadership Institute, when we talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about this brain's organizing principle first, because at the core of this is emotions coming into your brain, and we actually, what we call the veto power, have half a second to determine whether we feel threatened by this piece of information or not. And it's in that moment where emotional intelligence and good habits kick in, where we have the choice as to how we're going to react to the person, to the circumstances that we're finding ourselves in.
Now, that's a very short window in which to choose.
To the brain, it's a long time. And the more we practice, the better we get at it. So it's important, because sometimes I also call it the superpower that we've got. So it's scientifically called the veto power. What we know about emotions is that when we don't notice our emotions, it reflects in our body. So you asked about the head, heart, and hands, the body-mind link. And that is what happens. So our emotions reflect in our brain based on the circumstances. If we don't manage them, they go through to our, literally into our body. So our body prepares with adrenaline to fight the system. And if we don't get rid of those hormones, it stays as negative energy in our body and eventually becomes illnesses and stress. And that's where you made the wellness link to emotional intelligence. So emotions are really a hard thing to manage, not a hard, like a hard, not a soft issue. It's a hard issue. It's real. It happens in our brains. Feelings is the narrative story that we make up about our emotions.
Yes, definitely. And I'm thinking about a simple work situation where a staff member may be feeling like their view was not expressed in a conflict with management due to fear that if they raise up the issue, they may jeopardize their job. So what happens is they swallow all these unexpressed feelings, as you said, the narrative that's depicting the emotional state that they have, and then that just filters into the cells of their body. And every time they around such a person, it's a reminder of this kind of negative energy that's flowing through the system, and the person feels stressed on a constant basis. Am I getting that scenario correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what we do is we place that situation and link it to other similar negative experiences that we've had. And that is unfair towards the situation. It's also overwhelming, and it becomes difficult to manage. So what we need to do is we need to notice an emotion. We need to label what the emotion is, and then choose the right response to that. And we can do that by either selecting a different, in the situation, something different to focus on, or we can just reappraise it completely. So when I say select a different emotion or a different piece to focus on, instead of focusing on the person, thinking about the passion the person actually has for this topic. And that's why I thought he was aggressive, but actually he's just passionate. So we change the situation for ourselves, and that becomes more manageable in the brain.
All right, that's interesting. So even though you're facing a threat, you're kind of flipping the emotion that you initially perceive to something that's more positive, so that you react in a positive way.
Absolutely. And the reason we're doing that is we sometimes use the analogy of getting a horse back in its stable. So the horse is agitated and wants to get out, and you're trying to push it back into the stables. That is almost impossible to do because of the strength and the force of that emotion or that horse. Whereas when we can calm the horse then he'll probably just stay back into the stable because he's not threatened anymore. And then it's easy to actually close the stable. And we do the same with emotions. So when I say the veto power that we've got and that half a second that we've got,
Yes.
I would like to introduce the SCARF model. Now, some of you might be familiar with the SCARF model. This is a model that's been designed by, or the first publication was by David Rock, our CEO, in 2012. And the 5 things that we scan for every single second for threat or reward are, as you can see on the slide. The first one is status. And status, we look at the people around us in terms of our relative importance to others. So we want to know that we are equal. When I feel like I'm threatened by you, I am not respected or valued by you, my status trigger might be higher and I go into a threat response. The second one is certainty. We are wired to want certainty. We want to know what is next, what is to come. And so with certainty, it is our ability to predict the future. And from a recent kind of now time chaotic world with lots of changes, lots of things being different, we want to know to what extent we are in the loop. To what extent do we know the decisions being made, why they are being made? At the lack of certainty, we actually again create a narrative and we create our own stories, because the brain will keep on searching for certainty. So if it can't get it somewhere, it will create it. The third one is autonomy, and that is about our sense of control. We want to know that we've got options, that we can make our own decisions and that we're not being told what to do. Relatedness talks to in-group and out-group. It talks to our sense of safety with the people around us. We want to know that we belong, that we are part of a system. Maybe we are part of this fight, we're part of this challenge, but when we are in it together, we don't get threatened that easily. And then the last one is fairness. We want to know, and fairness is a tricky one. All of these are perceptions, but fairness, although you might know that you're treating people in the exact same way, it is about my perception of that. We want to know that I'm getting the same credit, I'm getting the same time from my leader than other people do, I'm getting the same opportunities from others or from my leader that other people do. And literally every second, because we are social beings and we compare ourselves, we look at the world around us all the time. We detect, we look out for these and potentially can get threatened by these every second.
So, Hanlie, if I can understand you correctly, are you saying that in a general situation or in every situation, our brain is kind of, like probing for these kind of triggers? Is this what you're saying?
Absolutely.
So I'm like seeing so many of my own experiences as you're speaking. When you said status, I thought of the experience on both sides of the coin, when I am an employee as well as when I'm a leader in my own home or a leader of a project, kind of feeling prickled when people question a decision. I'm recognizing that a status trigger rearing its head, and at the same time feeling afraid to raise a question on systems improvement in a situation, and seeing the reaction of the person in charge, feeling like they were threatened, like their decision is questioned, yet it was just a general inquiry or a suggestion. I see that immediately playing out. And in certainty, I mean, at the moment, the entire world is in a state of uncertainty. Absolutely. How does this play out in our general behavior in the pandemic, in lockdown? We don't know what's happening at any given moment. The presidents of various countries, suddenly call up State of the Nation addresses and change the rules. Nothing is certain at the moment.
Absolutely. And the one thing that our research have shown is that uncertainty multiplies all of these, the effect of uncertainty. I would rather know that I've got an unfair boss. I would rather know that he never asks me my opinion than not knowing. Sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. Our brains really urge for certainty and for predictability, because then we can sort of try and manage it. Might not be ideal, but at least I know. And so the uncertainty we are experiencing at this time definitely has an impact. So what we need to know from an emotional intelligence point of view is that we are all slightly threatened.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's probably a lot easier from a self-management perspective to know that, and to know almost by default to think about mitigating my scarf threats and putting wellness habits in place, because I know there is so much uncertainty happening in the world. From a relationship management point of view, again, the same, to know, especially if people travel abroad and there's lots of uncertainties just in a normal life. Now with COVID, travel restrictions, there's so many things that could come into play. Zoom failing when we want, there are so many uncertainties. We really need to think, if this is how my brain works, and the research shows this is how all of our brains work. If this is the case, how do I build in strategies for myself to manage this and for my team?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Now that we can learn the acronym, and I hope people are making notes, those of you who are on the call, it's a clever acronym: SCARF, status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. How can I now self-manage knowing that these are my triggers, and that not only is it my triggers in my personal environment, that they are the triggers to the people whom I work with in my team?
Definitely. So I think the first step for me, so if we talk about self-awareness, if we go back to the EQ model, the first point is to know that this is what my brain scans for. And then secondly, to decide or to know which one triggers me more. Mm-hmm. Because we scan for all 5 of these, but a question we can probably ask the group is, if you just reflect on these, which ones are more relevant for you? Which ones do you think get your back up easier than others? For some people, it's fairness, a huge trigger. I mean, it could be any of these.
Well, I invite the participants on the call to put it into the chat. I'm not sure whether the chat is working through the WOVA app.
I can see the chat.
You can see the chat, but then you're linked on not through the WOVA app.
No, so I'm not.
Ms. Ricky Oliver, yes, the chat is working, Lisa says. So yes, Lisa, since you're chatting in there, which one of the 5 is your trigger, the one that triggers you the most, if you think about it? Because this is going to definitely be an interactive session. We need our brain, or we need our intelligence now to kick in and override the brain's default mechanism. So Lisa says certainty. For me, I think my one is a combination of status and fairness, to be quite honest.
And you might see they actually differ with different circumstances. They actually differ.
Hanlie, what do you find is a common one that's your trigger?
For me, relatedness is a big one. I need to know that we're on the same page, that we've got common grounds, that we have got the same passion. So for me, I work very hard at relatedness before I almost can continue with a relationship specifically.
Yeah. And when I first heard the word, just saw the word status without hearing you explain it, it went to the usual understanding of status, like something of a high importance. But the fact that status is, when it's my trigger, am I feeling respected and valued? And that's a whole new ballgame. Because when I think about it, that is really my trigger. Because if I don't feel valued or respected in a situation, I feel upset. I feel unimportant. I feel uncared for. And that goes into the sense of I don't feel safe.
Absolutely.
And that then goes into, well, why should I take part or contribute into an environment that I don't feel safe in? And then there'll be, my leader won't get buy-in from me. Or vice versa, if somebody within my team is like that, then they're not going to buy into the idea of the whole project's goals, or the school improvement plan, or whatever it may be, the grade plan. And we have these subconscious ways of acting out, don't we, as humans?
We do. We definitely do. But you've highlighted a couple of important points. Now, with status, there is this important thing, you've just mentioned the principles, which is around appointed status. And I call it appointed status because it's a role that you are fulfilling, and it's an important role that you are fulfilling. However, as a team, we still need to work together. And what you should know as a principal is that because you've got appointed status, people will almost automatically be threatened by you just because of that. So we need to think about things we can do to mitigate status. Things like instead of standing up next to a person to sitting down and we move to the same level. It's such a silly thing, but it really makes a difference. Things like when we're in a meeting and I feel a lack of status, I feel like people are not listening to me and I'm presenting, to actually stand up and present. So that physical status does play a part. If you are a very tall person, people kind of are inclined to see you as a higher status. Again, it's silly, but those are the small self-awareness things that if we start knowing that and noticing that, it actually makes a difference.
And it's kind of animalistic then, isn't it? I mean, if you think about it, we are wired from an evolutionary perspective to survive. As you said, the brain is not designed to thrive. It's designed to keep you surviving. It's for, to survive, not to thrive.
And when you say animalistic, it is the limbic system. It is the reptilian brain we're talking about.
Exactly.
So what we can do and what we should do as emotional, intelligent human beings with a prefrontal cortex, we should take control, and we should notice our emotions, and we should own our emotions, and we should allow ourselves to feel those emotions. And an emotion is really a signal for yourself to take action. So whatever that emotion is, to detect where does it come from, what is the direct experience, and to rewire, to reappraise that situation so that we don't function in that animalistic brain, but that we do actually function in our prefrontal cortex, where we can navigate this amazing new crazy world that we are living in.
Wow. So Hanlie, you're sparking up so many thoughts in my mind. And guys on the call, please put in your comments and what's coming up for you. When you're speaking about the emotions and the feelings now, I'm hearing things that we hear even as life coaches and whatever coaching field and psychological field one comes from, that feelings are meant to be felt, not always acted on. Then we hear that emotions is energy in motion. And what you just said is that the emotion makes us feel like we need to act upon it. So how do we gel that idea now? If feelings are meant to be felt and emotions indicate that there's an action to be followed, and we need to note that emotion and choose the action, what do we do with our feelings when we don't feel respected or valued? What do I do with my feelings when I feel that this is unfair?
We notice them, and we notice, why am I feeling that I'm not respected? What is this person doing? Is he really not respecting me? Or is he talking too loud? Is he talking non-stop? What is it that he's actually doing to make me feel not respected? Am I owning that emotion? And once I notice my emotion, so for me, the process is normally, my rhythm almost normally goes annoyed with the person, then thinking, what in me makes him think I'm not allowed to say this? Does he just need a thinking partner? Does he actually want me to answer? So I almost ask myself until I finally say, no, he's triggering this. He's triggering, maybe I've actually got an emotions wheel that I've printed out next to my next to my desk, because it is so important to notice the right feelings. So then I can detect, actually, I feel fearful of him, that he's so assertive, so aggressive, that I don't want to be in this conversation anymore. And once I know that, I can start dealing with the fear. So if that is the emotion I'm going through. So with noticing and labeling, what is important in that labeling, so I've just mentioned the word fear, is not to overthink it. Not to think, okay, so I'm fearful of this person because he's, not to overthink it. I've labeled it, now I need to reappraise. And I reappraise it into, no, he's passionate. Okay, so the person's tone of voice is making me fearful. I need to focus on his notes taking, or I need to focus on something different. And you actually elevate your status in doing that. What we also know is that status can't be fought with status, because then it becomes a power struggle. What I can do is I can mitigate status, for example, with creating certainty. So I can say, I can see you're passionate about this. Let's just clarify where we want to be at the end of this meeting. Or let's just clarify, do you want my voice or do you want my opinion? Whatever the words are that's comfortable for you. Maybe you can mitigate it with relatedness and say, okay, so what we both share is the passion about what we are talking about. What we both share is the passion for the children. What we both share is this. But we can mitigate that emotion. So your question is, how do I manage that emotion in that moment?
That is so interesting. Wow, this is really not just interesting, that's really empowering what you just said. Because now that a person knows themselves, and it's part of the whole self-management within the EQ model, that if this is one of the triggers, SCARF, one of the SCARF triggers, I need to touch on another one to reduce the tension that I'm feeling from one. I love that. So just to reiterate, you said, if I'm in the status, because lots of people said status, am I feeling respected and valued? And if that's your trigger point, choose one of the other ones to kind of find common ground on.
And I also know a lot of the people on the call are leaders. So by nature will have high status, or people that report into them. So what you can do as a leader is by default go in with relatedness. Try and build that common ground. Try and connect with people, because when we've got a connection, we're less threatened by status.
Wonderful. So the leader should ideally ensure that the team, well, ideally know, first of all, before doing anything, needs to know that how you feeling in a situation is exactly the same SCARF model that another person is feeling, but Absolutely. You have the appointed status, not the normal status trigger. You have the appointed status, and automatically other people feel threatened by that. That's amazing.
And that is the relationship management piece that we're talking about. That is self-awareness. That is knowing, before I enter any conversation, I want to know that I am in a toward state and that this person is in a toward state. So if they've just come out of a difficult other situation or conversation, then they're not going to be in the best position to have a constructive conversation with me in this moment.
And that often happens, when somebody has already been in a situation that is difficult. It's better to leave them to relax, calm down, than trying to talk to them about it. And I'm sure people on the call have had this experience. You try to step in and fix things, but it just blows out of proportion. So the intentions were good, but something goes wrong. And now we understand, because that person was not in a toward state. And you may be in one. So it's like, the donkeys, the famous picture, one donkey is trying to get the water on one side of the trough and the other on the other side of the trough, and they're both strangling each other at the same time. My goodness, Hanlie, you make so much of sense. I'm just worried about the time factor. Let's move on quickly.
So If we know SCARF is at the bottom of how we interact, so both how I manage myself and knowing what needs to be in place for the person who I'm having the conversation with, or even for the team, we need to think about then what are some of the strategies that from a team perspective that we can use to build that psychological safety that I've spoken about. And so at the Neuro-Leadership Institute, we know that the brain works best in threes. So we've got 3 habits that we know talks to SCARF in all circumstances. And I'm trying to, there we go. So these are the 3 habits that we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
If we want to create teams where people feel respected and feel valued, the 3 easy steps that we need to follow is to find common ground. At the offset, we need to help people feel that they belong. And what we can do there is, and again, what the research shows is that the 2 things that people really judge each other on, and so this is finding common ground is based on the relatedness principle of SCARF. And what we look out for when we want to connect with other people is warmth and competence, of which warmth actually accounts for 90% of what I think of you, and competence only 10%. So we cannot underestimate connection, and just listening to each other and finding that common ground, knowing what it is that we are both passionate about or interested in. Finding common ground really helps us and takes relationships a lot further than just helping create clarity. And I'm saying helping create clarity, that is our 3rd point. But if you don't have finding a common ground, creating clarity can easily fall flat, because then it can just be told and I'm not yet part of it. So that's the first step, finding common ground. The second one is to lift people up. When we talk about lifting people up, we talk about lifting their status and creating fairness for them. So lifting people up is around making people feel valued and respected. So I treat people equally, but I treat them as the important human beings, part of a team that we need to be in. Right now, we know the world is so complex. No one person can solve anything by themselves. It is just too complex. And so lifting people up, make them feel like they've got a voice and they're important enough to participate. And then once we've done those 2, we can help create clarity around sharing information and helping people make the choices that are right for them. So that obviously then talks to that autonomy and certainty aspects, which is crucial, again, as we know, from creating a toward state.
So when I look at these 3 buttons, if I say find common ground, lift people up, help create clarity, the first one, find common ground, was on the R from the SCARF principles, the relatedness.
Yes.
So we have to go in with an agreement. And I know when I was reading up and learning about negotiation skills, that the fastest way to diffuse a threatening situation is to agree with something, that the other person is disagreeing with you about. Like, for instance, I often do that. If somebody's saying something to me, even in an attack, I'll say, well, that's right. First, I'll say that's right about what they said, and then go back to, Knox Tulu is saying the same thing, reminds her of the basic negotiation skills. So you always agree first, find something to agree about, and then go into, where you need to mitigate that. So that's the relatedness. And then you said the middle one, lift people up, is now on the S, that's the status, and the F. The fairness, yes. So the S and the F. So we had the R, then we had the S and the F, the status and the fairness. And only when that happens can the clarity and the working towards the common goal, the certainty, come about.
Yeah. So I don't think it necessarily has to be that if the others aren't in place, you can't create clarity. So creating clarity brings a lot of, obviously, certainty into play. we know where we're going, we know why we are going there. So certainty definitely helps. But that is, if there's no common ground and you've not asked me about my opinion or my input, then that remains interesting. And it will definitely help because I know where we're going. But if you did it through finding common ground and creating clarity first, you will probably have my full support in the situation. And also when we talk about psychological safety, which we spoke about earlier, this is where it comes in. If we feel psychologically safe, we feel we've got a voice. We feel we can contribute. And we also more comfortable to make mistakes and to acknowledge our mistakes and to learn from our mistakes. And that's really ultimately what we want as teams.
You know, Hanlie, as you're speaking, I'm reflecting on a personal incident. And this is a little bit on the, I'm going to topple this a little bit. And I need you to clarify this for me, right? Say, for instance, now, you've got a middle management leader, right? Say it's a grade leader or a vice principal or somebody like that, okay? And I know in Lisa's case, she's in the editing industry. It may be as a sub-editor, and she's the chief editor of Teach Middle East magazine. That person in the middle management position has got to fulfill their objectives that somebody has entrusted them to do. And I know for myself, and I'm speaking for myself here, and one of the people that I work with as well that's on the call, I know that we take our appointed roles or appointed goals as very important. So competency is a very, very important aspect to our feeling of fulfillment, and that we did not disappoint the persons who gave us that role. And I noticed it within myself that competency, which you said is only 10% and 90% is the warmth, that I actually incorrectly work as competency 90%, and or maybe less than 90%. However, the warmth factor then goes down, and then I'm losing the EQ aspect of handling the team that's below me. How many of you on the call are hearing what I'm saying? That you may be, because you're appointed to do something, you focus on the competency, not actually on the warmth, and then may end up in a situation where things don't always turn out the way you thought it was going to turn out. I don't know if I just want to hear from the audience. Have you had that experience, or is it just me? Am I just one of those weird people that feel competency is really important and to be able to fulfill what I'm appointed to do? But you know, I'm hearing so many things that I could have done better had I been able to apply more of this if I knew better. Lisa says, if you are task focused, then you can forget the people doing the tasks. Yeah, sometimes that happens, including myself, Lisa. Sometimes I may even forget myself, you know, because I'm so task focused that often I may not even eat breakfast or do something, and which becomes a problem. And she's right, it can become a problem. And that goes back to the emotional intelligence of not managing oneself very well. As we're trying to manage everybody else. It's really quite tricky, isn't it?
And yet so simple.
Yeah.
Because if we know what our basic rewards and threat system does to our systems, to our bodies, then it becomes a necessity to manage. So a lot of things. So I know back in the day as a industrial psychologist, I used to do lots of different training and how to do this and how to do that and how to do this, and the skills were just endless that I needed to master. Now with SCARF, what I really know is this is at the bottom of everything. If I'm not in a towards state, I can't manage my stress. I can't manage my conflict. I can't influence you. I can't negotiate with you. I can't sell well. I can't, all the historic sessions that I had to go through has now almost come together in this one model where I can really manage myself. And once I've done that, I've got the capacity to then look to the other person and see, actually, this person needs to have support. And that is where that competence and compassion, the empathy, the warmth comes in, because that is, then the person doesn't need my skill of telling him what and how to work. He needs my ears to help him through his issue and kind of getting unstuck himself. But me telling him is not going to shift him. He needs to get there himself.
Of course. We've got an excellent question here.
No,
When we get back, can we go for a walk?
no, especially dancing.
1 second, guys. If you're going to just mute, somebody wants to ask a question. I can't tell you what the name is because it's coming up as 472325. Maybe an artificially intelligent robot on the call, but I doubt it. So do you want to voice your question? He asked, I think so, he says, what happens when you want to create the warmth, but there are people who make misuse of that? As a leader, you want to create warmth in your team, but you may be afraid that people are going to misuse the warmth. Where's that coming from? That sounds like a trigger.
It sounds like there's definitely a situation in the back of that person's mind. So warmth talks to relatedness. I'm bringing you back here. You also need to remember fairness. So you have to have your own boundaries, and you have to have boundaries that are consistent and create certainty for the people around you. You being warm, you being kind, won't let people take advantage of you unless you allow it. What we know is to drive results, we almost need to have the circle of empathy and driving results. If we want to keep on growing, keep on getting better at the things we do, we need to have empathy with ourselves, empathy with the people around us, understanding the needs that needs to be dealt with. We need to understand the skills that need to be developed. All of those comes from empathy. And we need to do that as a team in order to help us to deliver the results. So empathy will definitely not let people take advantage of you if you do it in a healthy toward state.
That's really something to dig deep into, because the question highlights some, to me, automatically, what's highlighted for me is that there's a past experience of hurt that may have happened that gives this kind of filter in the mind of that leader that, you know what, if I'm warm, I'm going to be taken advantage of. And that means if I'm operating on that filter, I'm going to be trying to protect myself, and I'm already in the threat mode. I'm not in a toward state. And so even if I act like I'm warm, automatically the authentic energy, because the body never lies, the vibrational frequency of what you put out never lies. And that's going to come out. So I'm smiling, but my team members may still not feel my warmth, because you don't realize it, but your energy speaks more than your face and your words.
Absolutely. And that is just the power of mirror neurons, which we all have, and we pick up on each other's, I want to say intention, what is important to know. And I think you've all heard this quote, but we judge ourselves by our own intent and others by their behavior. So that for me is always interesting when we talk intent, because I think I'm faking it. I think I'm doing it right, but people know, and we do detect in other people what the true intent is. And so when we talk about certainty, we say you can never over communicate. You need to make what is implicit to you explicit to the teams you lead. So we definitely need to be relatable when we lead teams. People work for managers. People work for their leaders. They, it is just, we want to feel part of that something special. So by not being relatable, I think you are missing a big opportunity for yourself.
This ties in almost like an underpinning thread to nearly everything we learn in terms of coaching, empowering, productivity, the responsive classroom. Those people on the call who are teachers, you'll be hearing a lot about the responsive classroom and building warmth and building empathy in an online distance learning environment. And the thought that was playing out in my mind from yesterday was there's so much of emphasis being put right now on the responsive classroom and how teachers need to make their kids, their school kids, feel accepted, have these morning meetings, have give them deal with them with proactive discipline, give them a wide variety of choices to give them that decision making and thinking skills and abilities, and as well as to have a very positive, consistent language. And then I thought to myself that how is that actually being played out by leaders throughout the education industry worldwide towards their actual teaching staff? How is this being played out by sales managers towards their teams in sales, whether it's an insurance industry or service industry, product industry? How is that responsive team playing out? And I can see staff coming out in everything.
Mm. And especially if you say in the classroom, can you imagine if I am a teacher and I am in a threat state and I need to teach children? I will be not showing common ground. I will not lift them up. I will want to go through the motions, which will then in turn put them in a threat state. And what we know, when we are in a threat state, we are literally in our mammal brain. We're in the limbic system, where we're not doing our best thinking, where it is emotional. And so that is why we need to understand the impact of emotional intelligence and the impact of, first of all, being self-aware and knowing what our brain's very basic organizing principle is, because it really is at the bottom of our effectiveness.
Oh, I don't think truer words could have ever been said, because whether it's the classroom, and I mean, look at the impact of that. If that teacher is feeling in a threat state and goes into an online classroom or a offline into an actual classroom with the students, and if they're feeling threatened, they don't feel that they belong, they don't feel respected, they don't feel valued, how on earth is that person to be giving out they belong, and they're part of it, and they have certainty. And it's even more important that it's in a time this pandemic when they're wearing masks on and having sanitizers, And even if we turn it to take education out of it for those people on the call who are not educators, think about it from a sales point of view. You're sending out your staff to talk to your customers. Your customers are the people that are putting the ka-ching in your company's coffers. If you're sending out your staff into the world, online or offline, you're damaging everything. There's no efficiency and effectiveness there. Wow, this is amazing. Thank you so much for everything you've shared. It's like almost like you've lifted the lid on a Pandora's box, but yet there's a treasure box within that. And we need to get you again and again to go through this, because it seems like it's just like the tip of the iceberg. How many of you feel like that on the call? I mean, is it just me that's buzzed up with excitement, or is anybody else feeling this? Like, wow, so much to think about. Can I hear from people on the call? Saliha says, what about those who don't take it seriously, don't take I'm not sure what you mean there, Saliha, by it. Do you mean the goals, or do you mean take the leader seriously because of the warmth factor? The leader. Salia clarify that. What about those people who don't take the leader seriously because of the warmth that they may be showing?
So I think we need to cut ourselves, have grace with ourselves. So if you are the leader that doesn't necessarily get the respect that you think you deserve, start again. Find common ground with your people, lift them up, and create clarity. I know it sounds very simple, but what you are really doing is you need to see yourself a bit as a chemist of the brain. If people are threatened, they do fight. And remember the 4 things: that fight, flight, freeze, or flock. And maybe what you are experiencing is the flocking, where people actually pull together in different ways, but against the leader. So the big thing the leader can do in that case, for me, I would start with common ground around the relatedness. kind of, it is a new school year. It is a new time to set the vision and to create new ways of doing things. Do that with your team, and start gradually, one habit at a time. Don't overwhelm yourself with too many things, but don't be discarded either, because you are the leader. Start afresh.
I think that's a really very practical point, because even if a team in this induction week before school is starting, even if a team leader asks their team members to kind of share their fears for the year, or share their hopes, or share what they're grateful for, that's already common ground. And the team automatically starts to feel like they belong. So whether it's a new staff member that's come along into the school, or a new person coming on into your corporate environment, sharing those three things, like, what are your goals or hopes for the year? What are the things you're grateful for? What are your fears? And then let that bounce around, and then we actually feel like a group, because we'll find that there's lots of people feeling the same thing. That's like, it's a running theme within everybody.
Absolutely. And if the emotional part is too close for you, if you feel you can't yet do that, then do that with the school in mind, saying, what did you learn last year, over the last 6 months, that you want us to take forward this year? So it's a bit more distant, but it will create that common ground. You'll get the voices around the room, and then select the 3 things that you as a team want to focus on. It's a brilliant idea, Atiyya.
Yeah, it really, now that you're talking about it, I mean, the idea just popped in my mind, but it makes so much of sense. It really does, because, and I like what you said, because if a person doesn't feel comfortable as a leader to expose themselves, maybe because that status is a trigger, or they don't feel safe in an environment, perhaps they were ganged up, as you said, the flock mentality. Maybe they felt like the previous experiences of leadership within another school, or even in the present team that they're leading, if they felt they were ganged up against or ganged up on, then they may definitely not feel safe. Like, as the previous guy said, the warmth may be taken advantage of. So using the school or that corporate or the industry that you're in, that goals, then slowly people will still see you as you are still asking them about their ideas, their choices, and their thoughts, which makes you look more approachable. It makes you look more human. And then that starts to be able to, so you actually start to feel valued and respected. It's almost like you're giving and you're getting at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that, you replace those negative hormones with motivation. And that is really what we want in our system. So see yourself as a chemist of your brain. Think about your emotions. Use your superpower, your veto power. And the more you practice, the quicker and the easier it will become.
Use your superpower, which is the beta power. I'm just putting that in the chat.
Yeah.
And just tell us again, in a short nutshell, what was the beta power? Exactly.
The veto power was that half a second between the first initial signal and before the hormones get released that are either negative or impacting you in a negative way that might make you fight, flight, freeze, or flock, or that can actually make you feel motivated. The dopamine and the oxytocin, the feel-good hormones that gets released. And you've got half a second to reframe, reappraise, put that horse, calm the horse, put it back in its stable to allow a better situation for yourself.
I think one of the easiest ways for somebody to get in or to tap into that half a second, which they obviously need practice, a lot of practice, doing, because it wouldn't be so easy if you're just starting it, is to identify which are those 4 F's are you feeling when you suddenly feel anxious or in a stress. Are you in the fight? Are you in the flight? Are you in the freeze? Or are you in the flock? And then ask yourself why.
And if you're still practicing that half a second, I mean, today I still do that. The other thing, if the hormones have been released, if you feel stressed, if you feel fight, flight, freeze, or flock, then breathe. Oxygen dilutes the hormones. So breathing, mindfulness, writing down your emotions is crucial to self-manage, to think about yourself with grace, with acknowledgement that you are also just on this journey. You don't have to have it perfect. You just need to start.
Wow. Hanlie, we have unfortunately run out of time. We're over time, and I would love to keep you on this call, but I cannot. So I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for the amount of insight and wisdom you've shared with us. Comments coming here. Wow, awesome words. Thank you from our robot 472325 on the call. And thank you so much from Lisa, who is the organizer of this event. We're so honored to have you on the call, Lisa. Of all the so many summits that you could have attended, you chose this one. We're really honored to have you. Thank you so much for spending that time with us. Ricky says it's her. Thank you, Ricky, for the call, for the comments. And you know I'm teasing. You know my personality. So. Yes, thank you, Hanlie. This is amazing. I'm definitely going to have you on different platforms to share with us more of this wisdom and to get us to start being better self-led individuals so that we could lead our families, our spouses, our children, our work teams, our philanthropic support groups or charitable organizations we are part of. Where would a person not need to be emotionally intelligent?
Absolutely.
This is what separates us. This is what makes artificial intelligence artificial, and the power of human intelligence. This is where there'll never be an artificial super intelligence that's going to be stronger than human. And I'm talking about that because last week I spoke on developing human intelligence in an artificially intelligent world. This is really amazing. Any last words, Hanlie, before we end the call?
I know we are all on the same journey. So my best advice to you is share what you've learned today with a friend and create an accountability partnership between you. Get someone on this journey with you. Tell them what you want to achieve, not more than 3 things at a time, and start somewhere and report back to each other in a supportive way. That's it. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really liked talking to you guys.
Thank you very, very much. Hanlie, may I share this PowerPoint on the group with the leaders who are here?
You can.
I can. Okay, great, guys. So I've put it into the chat. So those of you who want to take this into your teams and run a professional development session with this, Hanlie can be contacted at the Neuro-Leadership Institute of South Africa. And you can get her number from me directly, as well as from Lisa of Teach Middle East. So there's many ways in which you'll be able to get hold of her if you want to have her for a professional development for your teams. And I think that would really be something intelligent and smart to do. So there's the PowerPoint, and if you don't have the school budget to do so or whatever else while you're waiting for it, you may want to use that PowerPoint and plug in your notes into it so that you can empower others with this knowledge and build smarter, more intelligent groups and teams within your organization in whichever industry, so that ultimately we are productive, efficient, healthy, and kind human beings. And that's what makes all the difference to the life that we're living.
Absolutely.
Take care, everybody. Good evening. I know it's now evening for you, Hanlie. You're entering into the evening. Thank you, everybody here in the Middle East and the Gulf areas. I know this is definitely going to be watched over and over and over again because it's on the recording. And yes, thank you for joining us on call. Those of you who did so, it was wonderful to have you here and to hear your interactive support. Thank you from Teach Middle East. Thank you from the Middle East Teaching and Learning Conference. And thank you from Coach Middle East as well as from the Neuro-Leadership Institute.
Absolutely.